those that have developed a consciousness will necessarily have it available to them in every aspect of life. At the end of the day, we think of the little things. I'm here in London in a little park, and these squirrels are really friendly, actually. They're just right up to you, about 2 feet away. But today I wanted to talk about money, really, because at the end of the day, it's something that the vast majority of should probably think about more. It affords circumstances that otherwise you wouldn't have. So, why the topic matters, right? It's a symbol of status and power in society. If you ignore it, you can't really escape its presence in your life, its importance in your life. You essentially give up the chance to dictate what you do in your life by virtue of not worrying about it, which is a pretty massive issue, because at least for me, one of the things that really allows me to enjoy life is having a sense of freedom in it, right? It determines how much you work, it determines how much you rest, it determines which people show up in your life, it determines whether or not you can show up in your life for the people you care about. It determines how much peace you have, how deep of a peace you have to some degree, or it can at least. Money is not required for peace. Money is probably required for sustaining it to some degree, or at least protecting the peace. I'm thinking long-term or macroscopic, right? Even if you're a monk in the mountains somewhere, you're going to have to answer to someone if they show up and tear down your mountain, right? Most of the time, the peace that we feel or that we wish to have when times get rough requires absolutely a ground on which you can rest for a while. Most people don't spend the time to think about that concept, and it's usually those that are not particularly responsible that don't think about these concepts. If you ignore the money consciousness, what can you actually lose in life? You can lose your ability to choose. And when crisis comes, you will necessarily want to make a choice. You will stay trapped at your level of survival, always activated, never feeling safe. I can't say that pursuing it necessarily leads to a more safe feeling, but logically, to some degree, you are safer. You risk rejecting the very tools that would allow you to be generous, creative, present. For instance, I couldn't put this stuff out to you guys if I didn't have it. If I didn't have the money thing, I couldn't get the editors to put these videos out so that I could perhaps contribute to your lives in some sort of way. And it's always a paradigm shift, going back and forth between doing the love and the generosity and realizing that to a great degree it does require your soul, your patience, but also the resource that lets this thing build. That over time it takes years and years for your generosity to take shape in many large ways. In small ways, not really. But then again, you can think about character too. Character is pretty substantially established over a number of years. You can cling to the idea that you're above money, but the reality is we are dependent on it, my friend. You have to buy groceries. I assume you have to pay rent. There is probably some sort of transportation cost. There is probably some sort of education cost, and someone's got to pay it. If it ain't you, perhaps you got lucky and you had people around you that could afford it instead. If you cannot put aside coins for the future, you will never end up having what is required to feed those around you. But everywhere you look, anything that's really worth appreciating in London, in a lot of ways, has required money, has required some sort of understanding of it. I mean, the architecture itself, if you think about these buildings, and you think about the way that they were created and the amount of human labor and ideas that was involved in even starting the process, the only real tangible thing that I can always point to is the money involved. A person in the United States can often live quite well, a modest monthly income. I say about $3,000 could probably float you in any given suburb a month. If you're making less than that, continue watching these videos for God's sake. You deserve a little better, and hopefully act on them too. But the needs are tempered, right? What's funny about needs and wants these days is you can essentially determine what that is, because humans have kind of evaded this whole natural selection process in a lot of ways. So what used to be needs are just givens at this time, and now we're higher up on the Maslow's hierarchy. It allows us to look at this bird just dancing. What's going on over here, dude? I gotta show you this. This bird is dancing. Do you see this dancing bird? What are you up to, bird? I swear, I've never seen nature so interesting in a park before. There's actually a lot of these guys. To the hedge, right? You might be watching this and thinking to yourself, well, what do you know, Turab? Perhaps you grew up in a privileged life. Perhaps you did this. Perhaps you had that. Okay, cool. So it says something along the lines of, if I care this much about money, then I will grow shallow, okay? Or become greedy. Yes, to some degree, I think you should be shallow and greedy until you figure out why this thing's even useful. Conscious people naturally consider money in almost every part of their life because it touches rest, work, family, and service. Deep awareness is not about greed, it's about responsibility, right? So when I think of developing this thing in my life, I think of, okay, well, necessarily, what are you going to be responsible for? So, for instance, a wise man once told me that owing people stuff is actually a good thing. For instance, wages. Right? When people are buying companies, wages paid to legitimate employees, fundamental necessary units in this ecosystem, it's a good sign that your ecosystem is healthy. Those of you that study nature in general realize that there are keystone species. So to some degree, the environment that they are in provides for them, owes a debt to those species. And the species, on the other hand, owe a debt to their environment. Awareness, when spent on this issue, is universally beneficial. The hardest thing for most people to wrap their head around is something quantitative that represents your power and your ingenuity. If I reject the Western world philosophy of money, I will be more free. Correction, the West rules a lot of different aspects of the world, my friend. And it's something that, for the most part, can be annoying to comprehend, but kind of an important part of it, don't you think? So, refusing to engage with basic money realities usually means you cannot find peace when you need it most. You feel morally superior while being unable to choose your own place of resting. So to me, logically speaking, why wouldn't you consider this thing? Emotionally speaking, considering it is kind of stressful. But logically, what was that Kendrick Lamar line? A lot of people got a lot of opinions, but nobody has the power to do anything. Where do you get the power? It's thinking about the money. Once I earn more than I need, my problems are solved. Oh my goodness, that's when your problems really begin. I mean, to some degree, the solutions are really there too, but extra money creates new problems that require their own education. You must learn how to manage, grow, and maintain the excess, or it will quietly manage you. Grant Cardone says you ain't got money problems until you got money. It's because managing the excess really does require a whole different understanding of how this stuff flows, an understanding of taxes, storage, intellectual property, networking, whatever it is, it's a different way of thinking. Discipline with money will kill my creativity and my joyful side. I don't know, I get pretty joyful when I have a cool conversation with a leader about the new things that I want to do and perhaps the fact that I have the power to actually substantiate them. You are meant to live both artful, free-loving, childish, exuberant side and the disciplined pillar side, especially the men watching this video. If there isn't a disciplined pillar side of you, my friend, it's going to be very, very hard to have a family or to have anyone that is willing to follow your lead or even your partnership. The discipline you build to maintain what you are creating becomes the backbone, allows creativity and generosity to keep flowing. You got to have the discipline. Without it, it ain't gonna work. If you can establish a consciousness in any part of your life, you will end up being able to access it in almost every part of your life. So establish it in the thing that's more logically relevant, I say. The resource that allows you to do the things you want to do. Here are some action steps. Expand your money consciousness. Step 1, treat money as a field where awareness itself is training your ability to be present and powerful in the rest of your life. Study the idea of money consciousness directly and decide what it means to you. Step 2, define your ground of rest and fund it. Decide what it actually costs to create ground where you can rest without being pulled away by panic about work or bills. Build toward that number so that when your life becomes rough, you have a place to land, have a number, have a tangible goal, have a target, right? That's step 2. You don't have that. I mean, how do you really measure your growth? How do you measure the development of this consciousness? It's not easy. Most of the time, the peace that we feel, that we wish to have when times are rough requires absolutely a ground on which you can rest for a while. But you gotta earn that ground. Step 3, practice real delayed gratification. Commit to putting aside coins for the future so you can feed the people you care about and support the life you want. See each act of service as proof that you are choosing long-term peace over short-term impulses. Those that force their way in life do not choose their place of resting. As it turns out, not having delayed gratification is a wonderful way of forcing your way in life. So you will not choose your place of resting if you do this. Let money discipline train every other one. Actually, you can have a discipline, for instance, in the gym, or as an artist, or a writer, or an engineer, whatever it is. You can do that. Then you should. Wherever you develop it first, apply it to the money thing too. It's really useful. The way that you do something is the way that you do everything. If you learn, attract, maintain, and improve your financial life, the same muscle will begin to appear in your health, in your relationships, and your work. There are very few people that end up being wealthy that don't immediately see the importance of the relationships and the physical well-being. So why is that correlation present? Because it really does require you to think about efficiency and, again, delayed gratification. Step 5, embrace contrast and get lost in extremes. I don't know if I like that wording necessarily, but I think the extremes are pretty damn valuable, right? We're talking about this contrast between peace and perhaps the Western ideals of being wealthy and going and doing the things you want to do and buying the things that you want to buy. But necessarily, we do have to understand both these parts in our life. Because if we don't, again, we're not going to choose that place of resting. We're not going to choose why we're doing all this stuff. You know, pro tip, if you're going to go into this money consciousness thing, you better have a good freaking reason. I'm trying to give you some of those, but hopefully you can understand you got to really come up with that yourself. Without it, it's going to feel hollow. If you get lost in the sauce, the extremes are what you will hold to your honor, perhaps your core values. The extremes teach you whether or not the values are indeed core. Money is not the point of life, but it touches almost every aspect of it. It decides when you rest and how full you can be and how fully you can love, how much you can show up, and genuinely the people you have access to. You are allowed to be artful, creative, joyful, and childish, and still choose to become a disciplined pillar of your community. It's the contrast. Build your life around the concept of delayed gratification and discipline, and you will have everything else. Well, I think Usain Bolt was talking about this concept. He said the most free in life are the most disciplined. The thing worth being the most disciplined on is probably your resources, particularly as a man. And if you watch this video at this point all the way through, there's a very good chance that this stuff is actually going to be implanted in your subconscious, which is a really good step, actually. That's what the reading of the books does. That's what talking to the right people does. I wish upon you rest when you wish it. I wish upon you rest when you most need it. But I promise you, you will need this discipline. Actualize your potential catalyst. This world needs you.